Today, we're here to talk about the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC for short. The CMMC efforts build upon existing DFARS regulations. So please help me welcome the following individuals from our panel today. On the line here, we have Karlton Johnson to our far right. Hello, good morning, Karlton. We have Phil Lewis. We have Armando, Seay. We have Tony Sager. We have Charlie Tupitza. If I butchered your name, Charlie, I apologize about that. And then I believe Katie Arrington was going to be joining us as well. I don't see her on the panel yet, but I'm sure she'll pop in. And I would like to give everybody a warm welcome as we kick this off. For the attendees that are joining us, if you have any questions, please try to submit them through the chat feature. We will correlate them and provide opportunities for those direct questions. If you have a question for a particular member of the panel, please make sure you indicate who the question is directed to. So let's get started, Deb.
Okay, thanks, Tom, for that. So we're gonna start by going through asking you a quick poll question to the audience. Do you feel you already have a good understanding of what CMMC is? So that poll should be appearing on your screen any second, and we just need to answer yes or no. So we're just going to wait for those results to come in. And I can see those numbers rising at the moment.
Excellent.
So actually, it's a pretty even split, Tom, on that one. It's 43% yes and 43% no and 13% unsure.
That's excellent. Well, I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions on both sides and come up. Great. Let's move on to our first question. So I'm gonna go around here real quick and let everybody introduce themselves as part of this conversation. And what I'd like to know from each of the panel members is what has been your experience with CMMC and what do you see it to be? Maybe we'll start with Charlie.
Hi, I'm Charlie Tupitza. I'm the Cyber and Data Breach Protection Lead for America's Small Business Development Centers. And we see the CMMC as the North Star for small businesses. Beyond the defense industrial base, we see it for that has application in all businesses, that it gives everybody a direction to go into. One example I would use is that you really need to know what you're doing to protect confidential information. If you're in front of a judge, the judge might be someone in court, might be your employees, might be your customers, maybe the citizens that you're responsible that are in your area. And it might be a business partner. So at some point, if you're breached, you're going to need to answer that question. What are you going to do? And we believe that the CMMC provides that North Star or direction for everybody to use.
Thanks, Charlie. So, so Karlton, do you see this as also being sort of commercially reasonable security when it's measured against what's being built?
What Charlie communicated here was pretty good and on target. And I would submit that as we're looking at the CMMC model, this is something that is a capability that helps businesses across the defense industrial base, and it's applicable to suppliers outside of that. The model itself was created to help enhance and assess cybersecurity within the defense industrial base. And it's really the difference between CMMC and other models is that it's intended to provide and serve as a verification method for different levels of cybersecurity. So if you're a small organization and you don't need a whole lot of cybersecurity, the model accounts for that. However, if you're going to be a company that does a lot of defense work, it helps you to establish a level of security that is commensurate with the data you're going to have to protect. So I believe that it is applicable and ubiquitous across the enterprise.
So, Karlton, on that note then, right? So we said that this will probably affect about 300,000 organizations currently that's providing services to DoD, and then of course will probably bleed over to the commercial side very quickly, or especially the critical infrastructure. But why is the CMMC being created now? Are there any war stories you'd like to share in the supply chain, anything like that, to kind of give people an understanding as to why this is an important effort?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll put on my former government hat. I was a retired Air Force colonel. I am a retired Air Force colonel. I did cybersecurity for the last 26 years in the military, and then time outside the military. I have personally seen upfront and personally how the adversary is seeking to consistently take down our capabilities. And when you look at what we're doing today, the simple, equation of COVID has forced us to do work from home. A lot of companies weren't prepared for that. And now as you look at the conversations that are going on, the clear point is that we are dependent on technology. You know, every one of us has some type of communication device, whether it be an iPad, iPhone, whatever, and all those endpoints are targeted by the adversary. So when you look at the next level of how do you protect the information that we have that's critical, we have to know the type of information that we have out there. We have to know where it resides, and we have to have different levels of maturity to protect it. So as of today, and again, you wanted a war story, I'll give you one from a home perspective that happened recently. And I'm a really good cyber guy, so I'll just communicate that I was a little bit surprised with this. My kids are doing distance learning, as a lot of kids are with COVID-19. The school system that they were using was a Chromebook. The Chromebook came into my home, and because I wasn't able to touch it in certain ways, all of a sudden we found out we had this interesting little virus that was inside our home. Now, the good news is that I actually had it locked down, and I was able to see it, understand it, and defend against it. But this thing permeated throughout the school. What that told me is that even in this benign environment, the adversary is looking for ways to infiltrate. And so we have to up our game and look at cyber, not just from a business perspective, but from a day-to-day way of life, so it becomes part of our cultural DNA to protect our data.
Excellent, thank you. So, Tony, if I want to ask a question around information classification, particularly around controlled, unclassified information, could you maybe understand or explain to us a little bit more, perhaps where this area comes into play with CMMC, or even just information protection around some of the, like the CIA triad, how this would affect organizations from a confidentiality, integrity, or availability perspective? Is CMMC geared for that to really help an organization?
Yeah, one of the things I would say on the positive side about CMMC, I don't know why we call it the North Star, as Charlie said, but it's in the northern direction, which I think is really important. And I think also it recognizes something that we have tended to overlook, that everything deserves some level of protection, whether we know that to be true or not, or whether we have done the analysis to tell us that's true or not. That is, the history of this business is full of dependencies that companies didn't know they had, or connections that the government didn't realize were there. And I remember, I'm retired NSA, 35 years there. One argument as Cyber Command was standing up was someone was saying, you know, we should only protect the critical stuff. And I said, you know, any analysis where you can neatly partition critical from non-critical, connected from disconnected, is almost certainly going to be proven wrong at some point. So the point is not to only focus on some areas that you believe in your heart are distinct from everything else, but to say everything deserves a level of protection, whether we realize it or not, and whether a company realizes it or not. However, some things deserve more, and that's important, right? So we need to recognize sort of we call it CIS a social expectation, right? Every supplier, we as consumers, right? We have a social expectation of safety when we drive or when we fly in a plane or whatever. That's enforced by lots of things that we don't actually understand in detail. But around unclassified information or controlled information, you know, the history of the business again tells us that information that would not have been highlighted in a careful risk analysis often turns out to be really important. Right, it's the key to a reconnaissance. It's the way to get into a system through the side door, and so you have to, again, you want to do analysis about things that are more important than others, but you don't want to convince yourself that you're going to be right. And so this idea of unclassified information, especially when you look at it composed, and again, anyone who's worked government like Karlton or several of us, you know the ability of large-scale adversaries to pull together lots of information from lots of places and make sense of it. So it really is important to have some notion of protection that is within reach of small, low-resourced enterprises, particularly.
Thank you. So Phil, this question is really geared towards the difference between 800-171 for NIST and like CMMC. I know you're building controls or tools that'll help us with these sort of mappings and information. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the different levels, Phil? Because I know you're kind of consciously aware of the 5 different levels with CMMC.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. So just as a bit of background for those that don't know us, so Titania is focused on increasing the accuracy, consistency, and coverage of audit automation. So, you know, obviously 171 and CMMC fall into that, along with PCI and other areas. So it goes back to what Karlton and Tony were saying, and Charlie for that matter. What we like about the CMMC as a small business ourselves is that it does have different levels. It isn't one size fits all, you know, so it does tend to allow a level or a more level playing field for perhaps some of the smaller businesses. And that's where we see some of the advantage, and therefore you can look at the maturity levels, and I think there are some estimates saying that about 90% of the 300,000 in the DIB will possibly need between level 1 and level 2. So it should not be that sort of onerous and that costly for them to achieve the level of compliance that they need, and therefore not as daunting. And we're going to be working with CIS and other players to try and help automate that further and improve their ability to comply, but above all, their actual security, and therefore their ability to protect critical information or classified information, whatever you want to call it.
Excellent. Does anybody else have anything to add to that about what's the difference between 800-171 and the proposed CMMC standards right now?
Yeah, I would just add that on, you know, when you look at the CMMC, you know, it obviously absorbs a number of different standards into it. And as you progress through the various levels, you know, all the way, let's say we stop at sort of like the midpoint at level 3, it continues to bring in, you know, standards like the 800-171, and then it adds the CMMC practices and domains on top of that. So, you know, that's something to be conscious of. You know, we get the question all the time about, hey, if I'm NIST 800-171 compliant, am I automatically CMMC? Well, the answer is actually no, because the CMMC adds additional domains and practices that you have to check the boxes on to actually eventually become CMMC compliant.
Well, one additional point on that, and the difference between also the NIST and the 800-170, sorry, the NIST and the CMMC model is this whole idea of maturity. We're looking at growing cybersecurity over time and space. It is not I just do these controls today and I'm good, because the adversary is agile, they get a vote, and your enterprise changes as well. People come in who may or may not be trained in your organization. So you have to look at cybersecurity as a methodology where you go back and consistently look at your cyber readiness. And as you're getting different levels of information that require different levels of protection, you need to escalate that accordingly. The NIST controls are very strong, and that's why CMMC is built with those incorporated, but the maturity piece was missing. And so that's one of the major differences between CMMC and the NIST, but they are a collaborative effort.
So when we start talking about level 3, we start talking about the 130 controls, give or take, that are a part of that. You starts opening up the conversation for CIS, starts opening up the conversation of NIST, CSF, and others. Tony, do you see a lot of level 3 activity at this point coming to the Center for Internet Security for guidance or to make these two things sort of work better together?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Tom. It's an area that we're looking at because, as you know, the Center for Internet Security's controls really cover a very broad adopter base. You know, international, small, large, et cetera. And you know, we have to find ways to help everyone, right? But maybe using different implementation methods. So a lot, you know, the smaller they are, they almost certainly have no dedicated cybersecurity resources, no ability to bring in expensive consultants, no money for giant tools. So you have to think of a lot of this sort of being built in to manage services into sort of you know, suites of tools and things that can be very accessible in the marketplace. And then the role of a place like CIS becomes, I think, for a number of these folks here, how do we help people become sort of smarter buyers, right? How do they purchase or bring these services in without having the expertise? And that means a good request for proposals, good contract language, good service level agreements. And again, our model at CIS is we're not a think tank. We sort of gather communities of people together to find things that work, generalize them, and make them available to broad communities. So many of us grew up in this business in what I called it the build it yourselfer model, right? You go grab a framework, you grab a bunch of tools, you bring in a consultant, whatever, and you just compose security from the bottom up yourself. And it turns out, especially it's really clear, right, with the defense industrial base, that's only within reach of the very largest, most at-risk companies that have the kind of money and personnel and access to information. But for the vast majority, they need much, much more accessible. So we're looking at ways to make that as simple as possible. We've also helped tune some of our work in general, and it would be applicable to CMMC. How do we get started? The most frequent question I used to get when I went into the public and started speaking about this was not about what security frameworks, like how do I just get started? Yeah. My boss has a short attention span. I only have enough money to buy one thing. I only have 2 people. What do I do? And I often admit, sheepishly, I spent my life finding people's problems and pointing them out, never having to solve them. Well, if your job is to solve them, you want to know what's step 1, right? What do I do in the first quarter with my first dollar, et cetera? So we all have a need to kind of make the opening steps as accessible as possible and in a market-friendly, open, transparent kind of way.
Yeah, I'd like to address that a little bit. So one of the things that we need to be considering, and I love the point that you just made, is to get this information to the business owners who aren't the technical people. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing at American Small Business Development Centers are doing is we're taking the CMMC clarifications that are in the CMMC that are written more towards a business person than as somebody that's going to read a technical control. We're providing training to all our 4,000 business advisors. Our business advisors normally help people with their business plan, their accounting, access to capital. We're making sure that they consider cyber as a business issue, not so much as without focusing so much of our attention on the technical side. So once we get our advisors trained and we start telling our clients about the CMMC from a business perspective, we're asking the technical product and service companies to align their messaging up to the controls associated with the CMMC to reduce that friction that Tony was just addressing. It does provide that framework. So I think he's alluding to a small business person has so many people giving them advice, lawyers, right. Everybody's coming at them. And if we can focus, have that CMMC be that North Star, be the foundation, then this small businesses, like there's a little company called Nectar in Rhode Island that has a really strong product and service. For them to get to the marketplace, they have to convince people what to do. So what America's Small Business Development Centers are doing, we're establishing the what. The answer to what are you doing is the CMMC. How you do it and what you need to do beyond that is a different thing, right? But once we establish that what, companies like theirs then can get their messaging out a lot easier to it's a homogeneous message, other people will understand. You don't have to convince them what to do, the what is established. And again, back to the judge, if you're gonna talk to a judge and you say, well, we're following what the Defense Department authoritative body said to what to do, that's a pretty good answer as long as you have your evidence that you're doing how you're doing that.
Yeah, I'd like to add to Charlie's comments. So, here at our Maryland Innovation and Security Institute in Dreamport facility, we're, working hand in hand with the Department of Defense, Office of Small Business Programs, and a number of all of different agencies across the, across the DC area, DOD, and across the country. We're also working with the manufacturing extension programs. So, and in that work, just literally every single day here, there's probably a dozen companies that we're talking to from all over the country. Those that will be part of the Department of Defense's Office of Small Business Programs Project Spectrum program, which is funded by the Department of Defense, works right alongside Katie Arrington and her team at A&S. Also, we're working with the Office of Economic Adjustment and other agencies to actually get small businesses on the road to compliance readiness. One of the challenges that businesses have today is the NIST 800-171 has been around, the DFARS, clause has been there. So that's existing law of the land. And one of the questions we get, to everyone's point about small businesses not having endless dollars. Really, I heard this yesterday from a CEO of an organization we're working with already. Where do I start first? How do I invest? And our the goals that we're working on is to crunch down that technology stack. Also simplify their understanding. A 50-person company, and we're working with a 10-person company, who, by the way, has to be CMMC level 3 because of the types of things that they're doing for the Department of Defense and the civilian agencies in terms of the sensitivity. they just don't have all those dollars. So they need to make investments that reduce the cost of compliance. And through Project Spectrum, the portal as it continues to be built out, there'll be training there. We're building a curriculum with CapTech-U, NSA, and Cyber Command that will eventually be accredited as well. That will become part of the universe of curriculum that will help people get training through the PTACs, the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, and things like that. So I think really great points about these CEOs and COOs do not have the time. They don't want to be cyber experts, and nor do they want to be CMMC or NIST experts. They just want to get it over with. They want to keep doing business. And to Charlie's point, and to Tony's point, these businesses are multifaceted.
Right.
I've yet to find someone who 100% of their business is Department of Defense. They could be 50%, 30%. They deal in the commercial sector as well. And so we're right out there on the ground. I think we're in about 15, 16 states at this point in terms of working with organizations. We're marching across, going from east to west with the number of organizations that we're working on as we continue to increase the number of participants. I just want to say that.
So does anyone on the panel think that there'll be a self-certification? Do you think that'll be viable, or is that will not exist? Maybe Karlton, you can address that for us.
No, the easy and quick answer is no, and here's why. When you look at the implementation of the NIST 800-171, industry had the opportunity to self-assess and self-identify. For whatever reason, not everybody did that very well. And if you don't communicate that, your true state of readiness, you essentially open any enterprise. So the CMMC method is going to be we're going to trust you, but we're going to verify. And then the people who are going to come in to verify you are going to be certified through the accreditation body. Real quick, I'll kind of talk about that because I know this is going to be a follow-on question. What we've been doing, the accreditation body, for the last few months, we were established in January, and effective March 23rd is when we established our MOU with the Defense Department. So we've only been in existence for 4 months. That said, we've been working very aggressively to establish what is needed to have, so we can have the prerequisites, the processes, procedures, infrastructure, and training mechanisms needed for what we call the CMMC ecosystem. And so that ecosystem is going to allow us to support the DIB with credentialed and accredited people who can go out and test and check various CMMC levels. The components of that will include provisional status, where we have provisionally certified professionals. And these are people who are going to go out in a provisional timeline, which we're still defining with DoD. And in that timeline, they will actually go out and do certifications on specified government contracts. This is going to allow us to test out the capabilities within a controlled environment, and then make sure that the processes and infrastructure we put in place work appropriately. The next level of that will be accreditation body accredited organizations. So these are going to be people who are licensed to deliver CMMC training services and assessments through organizations like certified third-party assessment organizations, or what we call C3PAOs, licensed training partners, people who are actually licensed to employ the CMMC training materials, licensed publishing partners, and then organizations seeking CMMC assessment, or organizations seeking assessments. And then the last part of that ecosystem are going to be accreditation body credentialed professionals. And these are actual people who have completed the
Okay.
AV course.
It's Katie.
This is Katie Arrington.
Katie.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, Karlton. I'm sorry to interject. And I have been listening to this entire conversation. And there's a couple of points I want to make. First, I appreciate the earnestness and the desire to get things done. But it's just to let everyone know, the only people that are authorized to do any type of audit at your company are going to be approved only through the CMMC AB. So all the great work that Dreamport is doing with the work that they're doing with Cybercom and others, that will not get you certified. You will still have to get an auditor. I've been getting text messages while you guys are on, so you have a lot of people watching, but I just want to make sure that they, it's as we go through this process, and we're launching as we speak, that we're clear about who can do what to whom in this environment, because it does matter. We want to make sure that we have the right people in your company doing the audits and the assessments.
That's a great point, Katie, because even yesterday with one of the DoD suppliers at CEO of a company, she had gotten some information from the Navy, as you know, Katie, slides were briefed, I think last week, you and Shannon. She got the impression that she could get CMMC accredited, and I was talking to her, she had her entire team on the line. I go, no, ma'am, you will not be able to be accredited. I'm happy to get on the phone with the Navy and let them know that they're probably referencing NIST 800-171, but to give you a firm schedule and a roadmap towards CMMC accreditation is not something that we can provide. And we talked about that yesterday with Ben Cupine on the seminar that we did. So yeah, there's a lot of aggressiveness about trying to get certified by the end of the year or this or the other. So I caution you.
So we will have non-attributional. We're in the process now, and I know Karlton's on the call, where we're going out now and we're walking through current contracts and mapping them. We did a tabletop exercise about this this past week that was hugely successful. That really, it's helping us codify what it is we need to look to standardize the assessment. Because I think that's where the biggest concern for industry is comparing apples to apples and making sure that one auditor's view would be the same as another auditor's view. When you think about things like two-factor authentication, and what is two-factor authentication? The first thought about that should be from anyone is, why would I need two-factor authentication? Well, the reason would be, do you share your password with any member of your family or your staff? The fact that we have two-factor is to put in, mitigation and, redundancy in systems. But would one auditor look at two-factor and another auditor look at two-factor need to be standardized? And that's what we're really focusing on right now, is how do we make sure we do that right, and we do it so that it has an adjudication baseline. And that's really, important when it comes to businesses, because businesses are going to depend on the CMMC for more than just DoD. We talked, I know, Armando, we've been on a couple of sessions where we've talked about the outcome from the National Cyber Solarium report. And, for those of you that are in the UK or those of you that are in the US listening to this right now, one of the big pushes that we have is to amend Sarbanes-Oxley, which is the law that we use when we do our SEC filings, to include cybersecurity ratings and reporting. So this is, the CMMC is the start of, I think, a global initiative to really level set, but to make sure that everybody understands cyber is, the foundation, but you gotta have a baseline that you can defend, because we can't help it if somebody doesn't win work because they're not at the level that they think that they are. We need to make sure that the accreditation body and that the auditors have something solid that we in the government can come back and say, this is the baseline, this is what it needed to be if they were off from this. So I just want to make really clear, because this is a big deal, who can audit you and why we're going so, not slowly, I would say strategically, on working through the pathfinders and the pilots with the industry and with the AB body. And I'll stop there.
And this is Karlton, just to kind of to wrap up on that point, and that's where I was outlining the various teams that will do that certification. As Katie has said, we will have the professionals who will go out and do the assessments, people who will be instructors, who are certified to be instructors, and quality auditors. So the AB is building out within that ecosystem all the people and parts and components that will help do that. And as she said, those will be resident within the AB and will be the authoritative source. Over.
And I can't say enough for the support, right? The awesome support that, you know, Charlie has been able to provide and Armando has been able to provide. You know, the partnership with industry was paramount to this whole effort being successful. And that small businesses are the backbone. I'm the literal backbone of our industrial base. But as we've seen through, you know, and I'm sorry, I'm outside the Pentagon. It's a windy day here. If we've seen through, you know, the examples of COVID, how critical small businesses are to our world economy, that we need to do our utmost best as a collaborative, because we all care, right? Everybody on this phone call cares about small businesses, innovation. We're passionate about it. So we need to help those who may see this as a challenge they can't overcome, but we really need to craft it. You know, you, Charlie and Armando, Karlton, you guys have all done amazing work at making this palatable, right, and understandable. I think that's been the biggest part of this whole episode of our, you know, our nation and our world's history, is how we've all come together on this issue. Over.
I'd like to say something about, you know, Armando's Project Spectrum team. I'm up with them at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock in the evening, communicating with them on a regular basis. And it's so great to have to be working with such a passionate group that really cares about small businesses. And we're working through things, sharing lessons learned and passing information back and forth. So we're really excited about that relationship with them.
Yeah, we stay up late, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So does Katie, by the way. I've gotten messages back. Oh my God, she's up.
Listen, I never sleep. I'm like, you know, that secret thing in the corner. I'm never sleeping. But
Sure,
it's
tiger in the cage.
There are things that I think that we, you know, one of the big questions I've been getting, and I'd open it up to the team on the phone, right, is what do I do now? Right. CMMC may not get through the rule change until October. I can't put it into contracts. Do I do anything now? Yep. Yes, you do. And, you know, everybody on this call, I was on the CREST website yesterday. I was, you know, looking through what, you know, Charlie's been doing and Armando. There are enough resources out there right now for those of you on the call and listening in, that you can go and look at what Dreamport's doing. Go to projectspectrum.ic. Those are huge opportunities to get education. Go to the DoD website and download the model. It's there. It's easily written. We did the overlay of the ISO standard, the NIST 171, 53, a bunch of those. And we did our best in that guidebook. And you go into the appendix to take it and translate NIST into English, into usable controls that you can understand. And it's a passion for the team that created this, APL, Johns Hopkins, Carnegie Mellon, my team, and industry, that they created something that you didn't need to wait to use, that you can go out and use it now, implement it now, because the earnest isn't on, you know, and I know everybody's heard me say this, but it's really not about the department wanting to gig industry. This really is about ensuring the security and the stability of the industrial base. And go ahead.
So Katie, the question that's in front of us, I think, is actually a really good one to underscore then. So, you know, what is the key to accelerating compliance amongst the SMBs in particular? Is there something that you would call to an action? Because again, I think I completely agree with you. Regardless of where CMMC ends up, you know, cybersecurity enhancements, all of us on the phone have been doing this for many, many years. And it's very difficult, I think, for organizations to go ahead and digest that this is now commercially reasonable security to do business. So what would you like to see them be doing, as you pointed out? Would you like to see them use a particular control set, review the materials as you're summarizing now?
Absolutely. So the model itself, if you don't, and you have to make a decision for your company, and this is a big decision for small businesses to make. Are you going to do these controls organically, or are you going to outsource it? And to set your path on that now, if you're going to outsource and use cybersecurity as a service, then you need to start planning now. How are you going to do that? Do you have the resources internally to do it in your company? Do you need to go out? That's why the model level 2, CMMC level 2, is really a guide for resourcing for a company on how they're getting, from level 1, which are virtual no cost controls that you should be doing at home anywhere, to level 3 is a big step. So look at level 2, look at the guides, reach out to your PTACs, your professional technical assistance centers, reach out if you're in the US to the Small Business Administration, reach out to, if you have a small business contracting office at a prime contract or a subcontract you work with, reach out to them now to see what opportunities are there, because there are a lot of them, to get positioned and to get education and to get training along with all of the ones there today. But don't wait, and understand that if you have that clause in your contract, and everybody on the call, they say it doesn't apply to me, the FAR clause does, and everybody should look at their contracts and see, do I have that FAR clause in it? If so, I need to at least be CMMC level 1. If I have the DFAR rule, even before the rule change, you should be implementing, if you have DFAR rule 252-204-7012 in your contracts, you're telling the federal government today that you're attesting you're doing the 110 controls.
Right.
Everybody on this call, we're a resource for you. Reach out. We're here to help. We don't want you to go away. That would be my big thing. Do it now. Don't wait. The audit is something that will be due at the time of contract award. So you have time to get good. Let's get good.
Yep.
And this is Carl. One additional thing, this is something the team was talking about earlier. I think Charlie was one who initiated this. In addition to what Katie said, putting on the CEO hat, one of the things that I think organizations aren't doing as well that they can do better is, where does cyber reside in your business strategy? Do you see it as a cost center, or do you see it as an enabler? And just by way of example, when you look at, and I won't call out companies, but I'll just call out examples. When you look at recent examples where companies have been cyber attacked, all right, and dig down to find out what happened, who's usually the one that's fired? It's the CIOs or the IT team. But this is a business decision. And so in addition to looking at how you're positioning yourself, whether you're going to look at the NIST controls or what have you, identify where cyber resides in your business strategy. Identify if you see it as an enabler, and if so, what are the things that you put in place so that when you're going to compete, you can use your cyber readiness as a strength to say, in addition to all the really nice things that I can do as a company, I'm also exceptionally cyber secure. So I'm going to protect your data as good as or better as I do mine. That is this entry point for organizations. So, but that's a different way of thinking about this construct.
I'd like to add to what Karlton and
this is falls into our model, and we're doing the work with helping people with their business plans, and the marketing plans. Yeah,
one of the things we advise business owners, and I deal with a lot of business owners, as Katie pointed out, there's a lot of help out there. So we even have the manufacturing extension programs that are funded through, they get funding through the Office of Economic Adjustment to individual states. Some of them are within academic institutions, as Katie, I guess, and I know both really well. Some of them are independent, non-for-profits as well, that work with the manufacturing, the defense industrial supply base, as well as the commercial sector. And they're firmly, going, in the direction of educating around CMMC, but getting their businesses that have the existing clauses, the DFAR 7012 and so on and so forth, as Katie mentioned, and getting them along the road. I think Katie has said this before, is you can't lose anything by going down that road. It's existing policies, so you're not going to get hurt. Learn how the CMMC is going to work, deal with your existing policy, and as CMMC comes online, it's not going to hurt you. The other thing we talk to CEOs about, and they always are talking to me about their budgets and how to make the investments towards compliance, is we talk about cyber value at risk, right? Look at the organization holistically, from where, if there's going to be a compromise with one of your DoD contracts or one of your other supplier contracts, is it going to hurt the most? Start budgeting around those risks first. Cyber value at risk. It's something that I learned at the White House a couple of years ago. At the time, there was a CISO there who talked about the fact that everyone's making investments all over the place. We all know small businesses don't have those kinds of budgets. Everyone's got blinking lights, and they're still not cyber secure because misconfigured firewall, switches, routers, policy, all the things that the CMMC is designed to help you, basically get in line, but the existing policy can help you there as well. And that's what we're doing with the companies that we're working with. Is CMMC education as it's coming along. Let's work with the existing policy and let's get you down the road slowly but surely. As to Katie's point, there's something you can do today. Don't stand by and wait.
And one, because I know time is dwindling on this, and the one thing I want everyone, when the DFAR rule change comes for public comment, the big push that we put on this was making sure security was an allowable cost. And we did a great deal of research on making sure that when we ask for something in the government, to which I believe, when they first put this DFAR clause in and the NIST 171, no one understood the cost of security. Now we really have our arms around it, and we want to build it into the rate, because if we're asking for it in the government, we should be able to pay you for what we're asking for. Where I think, and I would love to have another conversation about this, is the DoD is making it an allowable cost. Well, what about those agencies that just ask you to do it as a voluntary?
Okay.
And how does that apply? That's my next question, my big one.
Katie, this is Phil. I'd like to pick up on a couple of points you made about consistency and enabling small businesses. I think the US compared to the UK has advantages already in that CIS and DISA have done great work making certain controls concrete via their benchmarks, which in turn allows companies such as ourselves to automate them. And it makes it a much more consistent and I suppose accessible service, via a managed service.
Absolutely. And one of the things I'll say that we learned, right, was through the UK. I mean, the UK set the, we joke around a lot in the building about it, but what the UK did about getting that certification and leaning into it and the standards and making sure that you have a responsible party you can go to. And that's, I would say the AB body has a huge job in front of them, making sure companies, the C3PAOs, the auditors, like the sponsor of this event, they get the right adjudication baseline so that when they go out, we've all got it. But it's, it's a collaborative event, and it's learning from best examples, best business cases. And the UK has been an amazing resource for us. I will say thank you to the entire country, because it really has been helpful to us laying this out. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, as my mother would always say.
They're coming back, Katie. I just was on the messaging with the UK folks, the embassy, the cyber liaison to Cyber Command, and at the embassy, and we were exchanging messages about talking about the CMMC. So they're watching very closely. We learned from them, and I think they're now going to kind of pay attention to what we're doing and see what they can learn from us. And, under your leadership and the way you've rolled this out, it's interesting to see them coming back around to wanting to have a discussion. So we're planning an event with the UK here real soon on the whole topic, what lessons we learned from them, and what they're learning from us, and what you and your team are doing as well.
So on that note, then let's do two things. Number one, if you're on the call and you'd like to submit a question, please do so in the chat. Deb, if you don't mind, if there's a couple questions you want to come from the audience that you might want to throw out, that would be a good time to do that. I know we have about 10 minutes left on our scheduled time.
Okay, that's lovely. Thanks a lot, Tom. So we have had a lot of questions coming in, and I will fire a couple to the panel. So thank you very much. So can you outline what a CREST member penetration testing company needs to do in order to become an accredited body to provide CMMC to clients? It seems the CMMC AB RFI process has passed.
Absolutely not. The AB RFI process was there were a couple of different ones. For a CREST organization, they would need to go through the portal on the AB website and register for the training and accreditation program. That is, and Karlton, you can speak to when that portal will be open, correct?
That's correct. That's supposed to happen within the next couple of weeks. And if you want to become, for example, a C3PAO, all that information is going to be identified on the website. Essentially, people will register. We'll go through an adjudication process. There'll be a licensing process as part of that. And then we would establish an organization as a C3PAO. That entire ecosystem that we've been talking about is going to be defined on the website, and we expect to have that live within the next couple of weeks.
And with that,
there's a recording from yesterday's event where Karlton's fellow chair put out some views on that. I think some of it's going to put on the website as well. So, absolutely.
And one of the things is we absolutely need participants, you know, as this is something that affects the DoD globally. We need to have companies in, you know, our allied partner countries that are capable of certifying and auditing so that we can continue programs like the F-35, like many multinational, you know, programs we have. So we absolutely realize that this is going to be a big undertaking, and appreciate companies and organizations such as yourself as, you know, leaning in and wanting to be a part of getting good.
And while I'm thinking about it, if you don't have it, a lot of the information is going to be available on the CMMC AB website, www.cmmcab.org. Very soon you will see this mapping, and it's going to be very clear because our focus has been providing clarity, consumability, and conciseness on this, so people understand exactly what the flight path is if you want to become a C3PAO, or even if you just want to be an assessor, how that's going to work. So stay tuned, a lot's coming very soon.
Excellent. Deb, we can have another question from the audience. That'd be great.
That's great. So we've got one here. Katie mentioned a few resources for CMMC, Project Spectrum, Dreamport. There was another one that they couldn't recall, but can you remember what that resource was? So I don't know if you could just say that one, Katie, for the people on.
Yes, there's the PTACs, which are Professional Technical Assistance Centers. You can Google that. You can also go to the Small Business Administration and go to their website, and they have cybersecurity education and training there as well. And then if you're working on a DoD contract, every acquisition shop or contracting shop has a small business outreach. You can reach into them and they can help provide assistance. We are working on programs, additional programs to help, you know, get companies through this, but it's a lot of partnership and, you know, working with our current, you know, the Project Spectrums, the Dreamports. So there are a tremendous amount of resources. And what I can do, Debbie, is I will email you a website link and you can submit it out to your attendees where they can go for assistance.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Katie. It's really appreciated. So if we've got time, I can ask another question. Is that okay, Tom?
Yeah, I think we go for one more, then we'll go for some closing comments.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So do companies not handling CUI need to be certified?
Yes. Yes. All companies within the DoD supply chain will need to get certified. That's why I referenced that FAR clause. Federal Acquisition Regulation 52.204, I think it's .21. I'm not doing my Rain Man today, but so here's, and I give this example, and I know that everybody who's been on the road show, as I call it, with me, will remember this story, but this literally is why it matters. Your adversary is not looking at penetrating the supply chain, as I joke around about the nuclear triad, the highest. They want to get in at the most uncontrolled, easy access, which generally is a small within the supply chain, who is unaware of the inherent risks that they have. And my example was I went to Transcom. I was with a small business that requested me to come out. They thought that the CMMC was a burden that they just couldn't get to. They're like, ma'am, we don't do cybersecurity. It was a weld shop, a spot welder. And I went to his facility and he understood what safety and physical security were and quality. It was clearly defined. He understood. I walked onto the shop floor where they were welding. There was clear lines of demarcation where it was safe to walk, where I shouldn't walk. I had to wear closed-toed shoes, pants, no dresses. You know, he had that. And I walked by his laptop, and my husband, by chance, happens to be a land surveyor. And I know no more about AutoCAD than I do my own grandchildren. And I happened to see his laptop, which was open. And the Facebook icon was popping up and down because someone just IM'd him. And at the same time, Amazon had just notified him the package was delivered. And I saw the AutoCAD. And I said, can you explain that to me? I've never taken welding in school or know anything about it. He goes, oh yeah, and he was very proud of the work he was doing. But what he then did is showed me an aircraft frame that he had no business having. It was not marked appropriately. It was on an unsecured network. That right there is what the adversary wants. And the adversary has been very busy at pulling different pieces of our supply chain together for a long time and putting the pieces together. So I go back and it's I love Target. I will spend probably half of my income this year at Target. But the breach that happened at Target wasn't because their highest and greatest security protection teams weren't at the top of the pinnacle working on cyber threat. They came in from someone that you just wouldn't have thought about. That's what your adversary's doing. And that's why the CMMC is important to all of us, that every company, because even in the time of COVID, you know, I talked frequently in the past few months about World War II changed the way the world produced weaponry. We turned into the industrial age on, you know, on high speed with, you know, global manufacturing of weapon systems. 9/11 changed the way the world traveled to see and to work with each other. COVID changed the way we interact, and cybersecurity is the one thing that was constant through this crisis, this global pandemic. The capability for people to telework, people to WebMD and have telehealth, for family members to communicate of a loved one who was in the hospital and couldn't have visitors. It was the one thing that guided us all together. But it's like fire, right? That technology at the start of man. When he first figured out fire, he had to learn the rules, the risk to using it. You couldn't put it against a tree, it would set it on fire. If you didn't have a way to vent it out, it would kill you. We have to look at cybersecurity in that same vein for all businesses. So the long answer is yes, every DoD contract within the 5-year time we have to implement the DFAR rule will have a level of CMMC. The most common level that will be out there will be CMMC level 1, which are 17 virtually no cost controls you should be doing at home. It's just good cyber hygiene. I'm sorry, that was a long-winded conversation answer to a very good question.
Great, thank you. So with that, we are out of time. I am going to ask for sort of closing comments from each of the panel members. Katie, I'd like to actually start with you with a comment about either forward-looking as to what you see happening next, or call to action for the attendees and the people that are part of the organization.
Both. So long-term, know that when this gets through the DFAR rule change, I get a lot of heat, you know, a lot of comment from people that I move too fast. The challenge is we can't move fast enough, but we hope that we're working towards an open and collaborative partnership with industry to get this done correctly. So bear with us, and that there's no time like the present. There's no tomorrow like today.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. Armando, same question. If you would want to give any forward-looking items or suggestions here.
Forward-looking items, I would tell industry to get ready. There's no reason why, to Katie's point, you can't get started. I'm telling you right now, we're working with industry today to prepare. Waiting for the standard and the assessors is one thing, being prepared is another complete different thing. To Katie's point, I can't second her, not that she needs my endorsement. Literally 2 weeks ago, we signed up a company, a DoD supplier in New Jersey, 10-person company. The young man inherited the business from his dad. Very small factory, hadn't updated their environment in 20 years. He asked about CUI. We looked at his schematics. To Katie's exact point, they were downloading schematics for weapons systems components that were going to go on ships for our Navy that were critical to those weapon systems being able to function, or to even stay on the ship and not roll off and fall into the ocean. And we talked about how that was CUI and how that needed to be classified and handled. And even at his size, he was handling some very, very sensitive stuff. So to Katie's point, the adversary is looking for the smallest. That's a perfect example of a small supplier. So I can't second what Katie said enough. I see it every day in what we're doing and helping her team and the rest of DoD with the rollout of CMMC and getting the readiness, as I would say. We're not assessing anybody, we're not auditing anybody, but we're getting them ready.
Thank you. So Tony, we've been promoting CIS for many, many years now, and I think a lot of the technical folks have been well understood as to what you're putting out now at the most current version. Do you see this as an amplifier for the overall goodness that everyone's been working on for years?
Yeah, I think we're a small but mighty community-driven nonprofit, right? And my sort of intuitive model is, let's find the problems that no enterprise can or should solve on their own, right? This is a community level problem. It's trite but true. To go from bumper stickers of let's all work together to actually identifying content in common, processes in common, tools and so forth is the big step. And so it's only by sort of tackling this systematically across very large scale, as this CMMC is trying to do. I think that's our best hope. And so the good news is, there's sort of a weight here that we hope there's a tipping point where the market, it all makes sense. The suppliers of services, the deliverer of product and so forth, that we build this into what I called earlier a social expectation, right? We need this. The economy needs this, whether any individual company knows it or not. And so I think that's the way we have to approach this. This is just about scale.
Absolutely. So Phil, obviously this goes down to people, process, and technology. Do you see the technology that you're building to make the mappings work? Is this an evolving space for what you guys are doing?
Absolutely. A little bit like CREST, we've focused initially on penetration testing and vulnerability assessments, but we've now moved more to the SOC, so to deliver continuous sort of detection and monitoring. But what that enables is potentially very cost-effective and efficient means of delivering accurate, consistent audit automation into the supply chain, whether that's the DIB or as we're already working with Armando on, or whether that's into, the wider small business community, which we're starting to work with Charlie on.
Excellent, and that leads right into Charlie. Charlie, so with all the people that are going through lots of, opportunity transition, as I call it, right? They may have recently left an organization, they're going to be starting a company, or they may be a business that's pivoting into a new area. What resources is your organization providing today that they should be aware of?
Well, like Tom, we touch 1.3 million small businesses a year on average. This year, we expect that number to be a lot larger because we're the unified voice of the civilian side of the federal government for COVID advice to citizens, right? So we're going to be taking advantage of that and helping other organizations understand that this is a business problem and we need to solve this as a business problem. So you'll see some announcements in the next couple of weeks of some major organizations supporting the CMMC on the civilian side, on the commercial side. And one of the things that I'd like to point out is that we're gathering all this information, and the information that we're gathering about our cyber hygiene itself is critical information that we need to protect. So when I started with this organization, it's the first thing that I recognized, and we asked the Small Business Administration to take a grant that we had for an assessment tool to be assessed against FedRAMP High, so we could protect that information. So I just want to make sure that people are actually protecting the information as they gather these assessments, that we see a lot of lack of discipline associated with that. So
Right.
don't give other people the keys to the kingdom by collecting all that information and making it easier for them to understand your hygiene. Protect it, please.
Absolutely. And Karlton, having the last word here on the initiatives and the efforts that you're leading, wondering what you could add to the forward-looking statements here.
Here's what I'll say. Number one, the CMMC the AB is here to help. We're here to listen. There's a lot of capabilities that are out there. We're interested in having those conversations to make sure that we're inculcating those capabilities to make this stronger. Number two, very soon, as I mentioned, the answers to the questions you've been asking about how do I become a C3 PAO? How do I become an instructor? Those are all coming out very soon, the next couple of weeks. Stay tuned on our website. And number three, I'm going to put back on my DoD hat. Having defended cyberspace, both within the DoD and outside, I and the team that we have on the CMMC AB, we're all volunteers, but we take this very seriously. We want to help you succeed, and we are going to do everything we can to make this consumable, clear, and concise, so that we as a team, a collective team, industry, and the DIB writ large, protect cyberspace for our way of life. Thank you.
I'd like to put something in for Karlton. I mean, I always remind people, Karlton and his team are volunteers. They're working hard. They have their regular duties and they're doing this. So a lot of respect for that organization and that team. They're working all hours of the night, just getting incredible work done for the nation. And they're owed our gratitude and respect for their contributions. And Karlton is one of those warriors out there helping the nation get cyber resilience. So I can't say enough for what they're doing.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Karlton. Thank you. So on behalf of CREST International and the 223 organizations that I represent here in the United States, 84 of them, I'd like to thank everybody for joining this panel. If the organizations would like to answer additional questions relative to CREST's involvement and how they can participate, please reach out to your liaison or coordinator. There are US CREST organizational meetings that happen monthly, so please reach out and we'll plug you into the updated information. And if you're not a CREST member company, you'd like to find out more information, please feel free to take a look at crest-approved.org and all of our friends on the panel that we're working with here. There's lots of great information at CIS, at Titanium, with Charlie at SBA, Armando at DreamWork, and Karlton certainly at the CMMC sort of space. So there's all the information that we have here will go out as a summary, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Gentlemen, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day all.
Tom, as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.